You're listening to the Teal Talk podcast from the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. We are a statewide coalition that advocates for comprehensive and equitable responses for survivors of sexual assault. This podcast initiative works to tackle some of the most pressing intersectional challenges for survivors both in Ohio and nationally. I'm Olivia Montgomery, Coordinator for Equity and Inclusion with the Alliance, and a link to learn more about OAESV will be available in the episode notes. Today, I couldn't be any more excited. We are joined by Breanna Allen, a fierce advocate and the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative Manager with the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. In this episode, we will hear about what the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative looks like, why it was created, and how it's helping survivors of violence. Bree, first of all, thank you so much for joining me. You and I were having a casual conversation about the work that you're doing. And the more that I learned about the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, it became clear that this is definitely what I wanted to share with our Teal Talk listeners. So I kind of want to dive right in. What exactly is the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative?
First, thank you for having me. I am so excited. I am a lover of podcasts, so it's really cool. And I don't know, maybe I'm a nerd. I love talking about sexual assault and sexual violence and eradicating it. So the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, or I use the acronym SAKI interchangeably, is started because of the untested and the backlog of untested kits all over the country. This is something that was happening everywhere, not just in Cleveland. So when we did our research, it was stated during the Cleveland.com that in 2019, there was an estimated 400,000 rape kits nationwide that had never been tested. I just want to repeat that number, 400,000. As far as Cleveland goes, in 2019, the world was introduced to a person that Cleveland knew so well as Anthony Sowell. Anthony Sowell had 11 women that he had raped and murdered, and their bodies were found in a carnal home in Cleveland's Imperial Avenue. And this is a community that is high of Black and Brown people. These survivors are women of color, of marginalized populations that no one was looking for. No one was looking for these women and figuring out where they went. In 2011, Mike DeWine, in response to the untested kits, stated that he needed to create some type of inventory between Cleveland Police Department. So from that initiative and having the highlight of Anthony Sowell and having him had so many survivors that no one was looking for, and to know that one of his survivors went to the police first and said, "Hey, this man tried to rape and kill me, help me." And they didn't see her as a survivor. They saw her as a Black woman who had struggled with addiction. So in 2013, the SAKI, the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative Task Force, was created with a timeline of 1993 to 2010, which rounded off at 5,000 kits, 5,000, where they need to be tested. And the advocates of the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office were assigned with the collaborative effort of the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center to say, we failed these survivors, and what do we need to do so that this never happens again? Mm-hmm. So we came together to increase our exposure to these populations, to ensure that these cases are being looked at as an equitable and inclusive lens for all of the cases, not just for the cases of certain populations, but that every case is being seen as that particular case and has getting the attention that it deserves. In the efforts that Cleveland Rape Crisis Center partnered with the Cleveland Police Department Sex Crime Unit, so now we're embedded in that system. So one of our advocates is housed in sex crimes. So if there's anyone who comes in who wants to report or meet with their detective, there's an advocate right there that can support them and advocate for them along the way. And also has the ability to hold the prosecutor's office and sex crime division kind of accountable of what they're doing. So we're trying to make sure that we're engaging survivors from the beginning instead of waiting until the end or waiting until the case goes to prosecution. The Sexual Assault Kit Initiative Cleveland portion is for cases that are from 1993 and prior. These cases are unfortunately that are outside of the statute of limitation, but Cleveland Rep Crisis Center is playing an intricate role with directly assisting with the victim's notification. So we have created a platform of how we're going to identify and how we're going to notify these survivors, and making sure, again, we're doing it from a multidisciplinary approach, making sure that when we tell these survivors, we failed you, but here are the services that we can use to support you now, with the goal of being able to identify the survivor and having that DNA retrieval for CODIS, which is a system for entries for reparations and past injustice.
So the only kits that are being tested are prior to 1993.
So in between the window of 1993 and 2010, they're being tested for prosecution.
Okay.
The cases prior to 1993, they can't be prosecuted, unfortunately. But we had created a whole system to make sure that we're not just saying, oh, sorry, we're saying, oh, sorry, and looking how can we support you to make sure that you can still have some type of justice that may not be from the justice system.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. So yeah, I know that removing the statute of limitations is on OAESV's legislative agenda. And for those who are unfamiliar, the statute of limitations states that survivors of any crime have X amount of years to report a crime after it happens. So I know that that can be frustrating when your rape kit has been sitting untested, through no fault of your own. And that kind of moves me into my next question, Bree, which is, what are some of the successes and some of the barriers to this initiative?
So first let's start with the highs. First, we're actually rectifying the wrongs of the past. That's a big thing, because Cleveland could have easily said, let's not tell anyone, let's not do anything. And we didn't do that. I think that's very important that Cleveland said, yes, we were wrong and let's fix it. So Cleveland Sex Crimes Division and other cities said, let's put a hands and put a control on this very alarming issue, and making sure that we're using a multidisciplinary approach and how we can make sure that this never happens again. So making sure that we're not just in our silos all the time, but that these community organizations are talking to each other. Cleveland Rep Crisis is talking to the prosecutor's office. The prosecutors are talking to the sex crimes. Sex crimes are talking back to each other so that no one's being missed. And who's missing from the table, essentially? Who are we not talking to? Who are we not grabbing? So making sure that we have our college divisions, let's make sure we're talking to our high schoolers and those things like that, so that, again, we are not missing populations. Cleveland Red Crisis Center's sole mission is to hopefully and soon be able to eliminate and eradicate sexual violence. And to do so, we had to be accessible to the community. So we had to start to make sure that all of our locations are on bus lines, because that's a barrier. How can I get to report if I don't have a car? Having our 24-hour team being able to meet survivors at the hospital. So there's no gap in services. You're assaulted, the same nurse lets CRCC know, and we're there so that we know, you and I know, that the sex kit, that takes time, and that is extraneous, and to have someone there with you from the beginning, it could be very, very crucial to how that person engages the criminal justice system. Having our prevention team in our school system talking about healthy relationship and prevention and consent, hitting it before we even get to the justice system, talking to those kiddos, talking to the school agers and the high schoolers about what it looks like and what consent looks like in healthy relationships and those boundaries, so that you can identify it, whether it's for yourself or someone that you go to school with. Our therapeutic services and our case management services understood that people come as their whole selves, and that their hierarchy of needs may not be what we think their hierarchy of needs may be. So for you and I, justice system, yes, let's put these perpetrators in prison. Let's do these things so that this never happens to someone else. But how can I be focused on my justice system case and matriculating through that system when I don't have food?
Right.
Or my mental health. I never forget, I had a client said, how can I focus on that when my brain is so noisy? You can't.
Right.
And for that client, the hierarchy of need was the mental health,
Right.
which bled into everything else. You can't do one without the other. And just making sure that we're seeing these survivors as their whole selves. And for the SAKI directly, it's such a high to be able to be at the table to watch this grow into something that's eventually going to be an intricate part in rectifying and ratifying sexual violence. We can't talk about the highs without talking about the lows. The lows of sexual assault work, in particular to the SAKI or the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, is time. Time is not on our side because, again, these cases are from 1993 to 2010. 2010 was 10 years ago. Some people were born in 1993. So time has passed, and some of these perpetrators have passed away. And that's like a kind of a double whammy. Like, I didn't get justice, and now I really can't get justice because there's no one to seek justice from because they're not here. And how can we give them what they kind of desire? Because we know that you do something bad, you get a punishment. Can't punish someone who's not here. And we have this thing called COVID that has put a wrench in everything. So time is a huge barrier that I would say, and just understanding that we are going to be at a deficit because marginalized populations have generational stigmas about coming to the police. And if you are a Clevelander, you know that the killing of Tamir Rice happened here. And how are we supposed to go to the criminal justice system when the criminal justice system sometimes has been not so friendly to us, and now we're going to have to put this trust back into them to hope that we're going to get what we deserve, and it's never been shown historically for especially Black and brown people that the criminal justice system is built for us.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a question that's not on here that I'm just going to ask you because I'm interested. So why is SAKI based in Cleveland? Is it a statewide like initiative, or like how does that work?
So every state, if you had been identified as one of those cities or states that have the untested kids, Detroit has had one, Chicago, Miami. I can't speak for other cities in Ohio and their initiative for the sexual assault kit and backlogging of sexual assault kids. It's just that Cleveland had so many that were untested. So Cleveland created its own sexual assault SAKI program to rectify, because I want to say we just tested 5,500 kids pre-COVID, and we kind of had to put a halt to testing those kids too because we couldn't test anything with the pandemic and trying to keep the community safe. So Cleveland created theirs, but Detroit can have one if there is untested kids in Lucas County, Toledo, anywhere else, they can have their own SAKI program.
Gotcha. I'm just like thinking like sociologically, like are there patterns with communities of color and where these kids are not being tested? I mean, you said earlier with the popular case in Cleveland that he was targeting people of color. So I'm wondering like if there's like trends and patterns of these untested kits being by people of color.
And we see that as a trend all the time, that there have been barriers to making sure that people of marginalized populations, especially Black and brown people, are seeing the same justice as people of non-marginalized populations. And if you're adding a part of Cleveland that is not safe, if you're adding a part of Cleveland that has high drug abuse, and you have community partners that don't see them for survivors, you saw them as who they came to you in that present moment, that's hard, because we all know that survivors of sexual assault are targeted, right? And people of those marginalized populations, such as drug addictions, or people who are in the sex work, they're targeted even more. And we have to get out of the lens of seeing them as just sex workers, or as just addicts, or as a person just with, mental health, because they're more than that. These are moms, these are dads, these are children, these are someone's friend, we as a community were looking for these people, but the community partners were not looking for these people. And I remember Teresa Stafford did a training, and she said that one of the guys, I cannot think of his name, but he said, I stayed in the ghettos. I stayed in those communities that you were not going to. He said, if I would have picked a girl who was blue eyes, blonde hair, you would have caught me a long time ago. I stayed where you weren't even concerned that these people were missing. And that was the case with Anthony Solo too, that the only concern was coming from the people who looked like them also. The concern was not coming from the community partners. It's like, hey, this person has been seen missing, or this person's family member keeps coming to the police office looking for her, or the survivor who went to the police and said, he tried to rape me and you saw her as an addict. And I am not above that. Before I got into this work and I started doing the self work to do this, you see people and like, oh, they're just crazy. But are they?
Right.
They're more than just what their mental health says. They're more than just what their address is.
Right.
And we see it all the time. People say, oh, I live in East Cleveland. I can't be mad at you, or I can't have a disgruntledness against your city. That's what you can have.
Right.
That doesn't make you less than. So I think that plays a part, that we have to shift to thinking and thinking that, again, these people are coming as whole people,
right,
with a hierarchy of needs, in that we need to take a case seriously no matter where it comes from or who that person is.
Right. Yeah. Like when I got into the field, I too had so many implicit biases that I wasn't even aware of. And it was at like this children's conference where they said, like, we're pulling kids out of this house because it has roaches. But what are all of the safety factors here? Like, just because you grew up in a middle income, environment, like, we have to change our thinking about, what really is best for people. And I even tell people, when survivors are coming in, instead of trying to immediately push them through the criminal system, like when you survey Black moms, the number one thing that they're concerned about is safety for their children and health for their children. So if we're not addressing that need, then there's no, like, this other stuff is not, just because that's what we're being funded to do, that's not necessarily matching up with what these communities need. So
I know that people won't be able to see me, but I'm like shaking my head vigorously because absolutely. And I never forget, when I started in this work, I started in shelter, and I had the same question. We can give them places to stay, but if we don't do the work so that they can sustain that, they're going to be right back where they were. They're going to be right back in the shelter. They're going to be right back in those situations, because we have to get to the root of it. And I tell my team all the time, you need to be talking to your clients more than just what their case is going on. If they're hungry, they're not going to want to participate in the trial prep. If they have their lights off, and I always tell them too, like, who wants to live in a shelter? Raise your hand. Who wants to potentially lose their children? Raise their hand. No one's going to raise their hand. And we hear those biases like, well, she should just leave, or they should just do this, or they should just do that, or especially with our survivors of trafficking, just get into a program. Typically, people stay with people because they are servicing them for something, whether it's an addiction, whether it's shelter, food, transportation, you're servicing them. So you have to give them a new means to that service to break that cycle. And we cannot say, come downtown Cleveland, meet with a detective that you've never met before, go into this justice system, pay to park $10, talk about the worst day of your life or days to a person who doesn't even know you.
Right.
And we're saying, come down here and lay your burdens at the altar. And we haven't done the work to even gain that rapport for them to trust us enough.
Right.
Or can we say, instead of using our privilege and saying, oh, come to me, can we leave behind our desk and go to them?
Yeah.
Can we say, you know what? I see you live, on Kinsman. That's not that far from me. Are you okay with us going to the library? Even ground. Even the
Right.
way your offices are set up. Is there a desk there that shows that there is a hierarchy and that I'm superior of you?
Mm. Yeah, I always tell people, take your degrees off the wall. Nobody wants to walk in and see your degrees hanging up. That doesn't mean anything, right? We need to.
Yeah, sorry. I can talk
No,
about it
go
all day.
ahead. You too.
Let them talk how they talk. I
Yeah.
will never forget, I had a case when I worked in a different county, and the detective was mad that the client cursed. And I said, that's their verbiage.
Mm,
That's their vernacular. You cannot get mad at them for using the tone and the verbiage that they see fit, because that's how they talk.
mm.
Let them be them.
Right. Right.
Take your blazer off.
Right. Yeah.
Take your blazer off. Get them some. Do you want them to lay their burdens down, but you don't even want to offer them a water?
Get him a Coke.
Get them and give it time. I tell the prosecutors all the time, can we have a few meetings before you go? So tell me about April 28th. How about you get to know them, and then maybe the third or fourth time you meet, now they're comfortable with coming to the justice system. They know you. They
Right.
know what room we're going to be in. They know their advocates going to, because they know us. We've talked
Yeah.
to them. We've built that rapport. They don't know you.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't spend enough time on that, like, civic engagement. We think that, like, we're doing something for you. It's like, we owe that. And if you have even 10, 20, 30 years of knowledge about what the history of this movement looks like we really owe people. And that's why, like, when you were talking, like, it's a form of reparations, I wrote that down. Like, that's the first time I've even heard anybody working towards, like, reparations for sexual violence.
And I
So,
think that too, we have to understand, especially with marginalized populations, the history that we have connected to sexual assault and sexual trauma, the generational, the post-slavery trauma
yeah.
that comes with it. And we're coming in with, like, I hear all the time, well, they didn't report right away. Okay, but they reported. And let's think about the barriers. There may be someone at home telling them that didn't happen. You just over exaggerate, or you just fast. And if you weren't so fast, this wouldn't have happened. Or that's just how Uncle so and so is. Or that's just how Aunt so and so is. They internalize that. Or they hear, if somebody mess with my kids, I'll kill them.
Right.
They don't want mom or dad to go to jail.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just want it to stop. They just want it to stop. So I think that you have to take all of those things and be mindful of it, and have that lens of, like, again, this person is coming as their whole self, and we have no idea the strength it took for them to even come here.
Yeah. Yeah, I was
And
thinking, even, like, not even things, that messages that they're hearing at home, but messages that, like, we're even hearing just in Ohio, like Micaiah Bryant, and calling for help. It's not safe.
yeah,
And I'm tired of saying that it's not safe.
it's not safe.
Um,
And to know that, like, I have to, and when I do my onboardings and I do my new hire trainings, I tell them all the time, you have to remember that this may not have been their first connection to the justice system. I will never forget when I worked in domestic violence, this survivor, she was a mother, and it broke my heart because we were the same age, and she had 7 children, and she had the reading level of a 4th grader, and she needed the support of the children's services to get tutoring and get that connection to make sure that her kids didn't get left behind. But she was terrified to ask for help, because she said, my mom accidentally gave my sister a bottle with vodka in it, thinking it was water, and we never went home again. And my fear is that if I get connected to that system, they're going to see that I'm just like my mom and not see me as a whole person asking for help, and that I'm not going to see my kids again. And that's real.
Yeah.
Or I called for domestic violence because my dad was hurting my mom, and the police, beat my dad up, and now I don't want to go connected to them or anything. And it's just that,
Yeah.
like, that silo and that hurt that they have in there is real, and we have to validate that, because, or even if they had a bad experience the last time they were in the justice system, it's going to play out and matriculate in how they do it this time.
Yeah. Yep.
And again, the system has, for Black and brown people, has never been set up for us to be successful.
Right. Yep.
But I digress.
And we digress, and we're going to bring it right back around. I'm already like, this is my favorite episode. I'm already like speaking it. I'm like, I can't wait until we hit end. I can get on social media and tell people I just recorded the best episode yet.
Yes, because
So
yes,
we definitely appreciate you and all the work that you're doing. And I'm super grateful to have known you, if it's not obvious by now, both in this work and outside of it. You're the homie for sure. And we are just super honored to have you join us today. So is there anything else about this work that you would like listeners to know?
Yes, Liv, I think you're one of my favorite community partners inside of work and outside of work, just because we've been doing this, we're young, but we've been doing this for a while. And the growth that we both have had, love it, 10 out of 10. But I would like for anyone to know about this work is believe, 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 believe. It's kind of just one other thing that I'm thinking about also that I'm going to say, that believe. We have to believe survivors, all survivors,
Right.
every survivor. If you're going to say Black Lives Matter, all of them do. The trans ones, the LGBTQI ones, the disabled ones, the blind ones, the cognitive delayed ones, the mental health ones, they all matter. All of them.
Period.
I have a shirt that says Black Survivors Matter, and it's because it's true. They do matter. All survivors matter. I don't care what or who you are. If you have been harmed and something has happened to you, your voice matters, and what happened to you should have never happened, and we have to believe you. We have to approach this work as an inclusive and equitable lens, and that's just a period.
Yeah.
What you do for, and I tell my team all the time, what you do for one, you do for all. If you meet late for one, you need to have that same accessibility for the rest of them. If you meet one you can't say, I'm going to have all my clients come meet me, if you're a Clevelander, in Westlake, Ohio, but you have a client who lives on East 55th, that's a 35-minute, 40-minute car ride. But you know that you have an office in Shaker Square, which is 15 minutes away. You can't say, I'm going to service human trafficking survivors, but not want to meet them at the human trafficking drop-in center, but you want them to come to you in Beechwood, Ohio. How are they going to get there? How are they going to escape their trafficker long enough to get to Beechwood and back? If you're a community partner, if you meet your client, not only just meeting at your client's not only meeting your clients at the prosecutor's office or at your office, lean on your community partners. Use their buildings, use their facilities, remove that stigma. Because who wants to go to the police department? Not me. Not if I don't have to.
Right.
But if you know that, Cleveland Crisis Center has a location on West 25th, that's really close to the client. Let's meet there. Why not?
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's a really good.
And what does that look like for what does inclusiveness and equitable look like for marginalized populations? We have to give them voices. We have to elevate them and make sure that when they're matriculating through these systems, we have to give voice to the voiceless. So if you have, everyone has privilege. I have privilege, even though I'm Black and I'm a woman. You have privilege. Everyone has privilege, and you have to elevate that. You have to use it for the good. Hoarding information, having that me-only information, me-only silos is harmful. If you have the ability to help them matriculate through systems, don't take the power away from them. Just help them steer. I tell my team all the time, it's their ship, it's their boat. You just kind of help them steer through it. You increase you elevate their voice. They want to have more trial preps, tell the prosecutor that. They need bus tokens, get them connected to resources. They want to get housed, help get them connected. Because all of that creates a wholeness of their voice. Because even if they don't win in the justice system, look at the other things they could have accomplished while they were working with you. Okay, no, that person didn't get life in prison. They didn't get the time that they wanted. But look, you got housed.
Right.
You have a great connection to your therapist. You have now been employed. You got this, and this. Those things also matter. Those things also matter. When it comes to equitable and inclusiveness, there's not much survivors get to dictate when it comes to the justice system. Let them choose where they meet. They don't get to pick if it's a jury or a bench trial. They don't get to pick when they go to trial. They don't get to pick the plea. They don't get to depict anything. Let them pick where they meet. Or when.
Right.
If you have a client who works Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and they don't really want to talk about their sexual assault at 5:30 when they get off work, but Fridays they get off at 2:30, but you don't want to get off early. Friday's your flex day. Bite the bullet for your client.
Yeah. I think that like choice goes a long way.
Yes.
You see that immediately when like someone's been controlled for so long and they walk into your office, and even something like, do you want to use a red pen or a blue pen? Do you want to sit in the front or the back? Do you want to, just the tiniest things? I absolutely think that is such a good point to bring up. Like giving the choice, giving the power back to survivors is vital.
Yes, and lean on your community partners. If we're going to do this work, we have to come from a multidisciplinary approach. It's a cycle. We have to be able to lean on each other. Use your child advocacy centers. No kid should have to know what an inside of a sex crime unit looks like. None of them should have to see the inside of a prosecutor's office, because they know that's not normal. And even if for the parents that are listening, do something with your kids after. I'll never forget, I had a client. She loved going to a crisis center. She loved me, but she hated going to the prosecutor's office. Hated it. And you could tell she hated it. And I said, what do you like to do? And she's like, I really love Target and sushi. I just love sushi. I can eat any kind of sushi, any day, every day, all day. I can live off sushi. So I pulled her mom. I said, Mom, what if you guys got sushi every time you got left here? So then she had something she looked forward to. That next time she was on whatever questions you need to ask her, she would do it. She was fine to be there. And she's like, I get sushi after this. And I love that because she knew it was almost like a reward, because I spoke up about what happened to me. They listened. And because of that, I've been valued and I'm being rewarded essentially, because I know I'm doing something right. Because traditionally, if it's 3 o'clock, I don't know about anybody else, but when I was in high school, 3 o'clock, I was watching Guiding Light, waiting for Oprah to come on. I was not going to the prosecutor's office.
Right.
Was not going to the prosecutor's office. So just leaning on those people, because they're going to be talking about the worst days of their lives. You want to be able to make sure that they're comfortable when they're doing that. And we always question, why people of color or Black or brown people are not obtaining services with your agencies, or why we can't have that, we're lacking in that area. Ask yourself, are you accessible to them?
Right.
Do people look like them when they walk through the door?
Do they even know that you exist?
Do they even know that you exist?
Mm.
And I think also it's very important, if parents are listening to this, or a preventionist, or people who are in the prevention world, verbiage.
Mm.
It is okay for people to use the correct verbiage for their body parts. I cannot tell you how many times we have had cases where people say, oh, he touched my cat, or he touched my pocketbook, or he took my money, that's my money. And they were talking about someone assaulting them.
Mm.
Or they don't know what city they live in. Oh, I think I live here, or I think I live there. Having those conversations, I live at this address, this city, I live in this county, this is my school. My grandmother's real name is Antoinette, shout outs to my mom. So my real mother's name is this, my grandmother's name is this, so that they know. So when it's time for them to report, because they may not report to you, they could report at school, and we say, who's harming you? And you say, Grandpa. What's Grandpa's name? Grandpa.
Right.
He's touching my pocketbook. He's touching my pocketbook. The teacher could have thought that was truly your wallet. Whole time
Right.
you're disclosing. You're
Right.
like, why isn't someone listening to me?
Yeah.
Because we don't know. So verbiage, and I understand like you want to preserve people's innocence, but it is imperative that verbiage is a big thing. And lastly, I would like to know that people come as their whole selves. I know I talked about that earlier and what that looks like, but understanding that people have their own hierarchy of needs that society may not think it's important. And society has not made it easy for survivors to come forward to report and navigate that justice system. So it may not be the forefront of their mind.
Mm.
Yes, the sexual assault is important to us as community partners, but to them, what's important is that they get to work.
Right.
And if they use you for your bus tokens, okay.
Right.
Get some more. It's
right.
Fine.
Right.
It'll come out of your paycheck. It's probably from a grant, because they knew that you will supply a means to an end for them.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Even if those like hierarchy of needs, like somebody wants, like their hierarchy of needs is cigarettes or some marijuana, like you are not judge and jury. And it was just a total rewire getting into this field where it's like, it's just all implicit bias. We have this like perfect survivor mindset. And the second you step out of that, I don't want, well, you're ungrateful. You don't even want the help. And obviously you and I are two very empathetic people, but there are a lot of people who aren't, and survivors end up not getting what they need. They get doors closed in their face. So
and I want to highlight exactly what you said, is that the perfect victim, there's no such thing.
Right.
And when you have that lens, that means you're not using the skill set that you were given. It's pretty simple. You're not using the lens that you were given. I will never forget when that light switch went off for me, is that, like you said, it may be marijuana, it may be crack cocaine, it may be heroin. I'm pretty sure, and I'll never forget, someone told me this, people typically do not, if they knew how impactful the drugs that they were using were, they probably wouldn't have used them. The first time they used drugs probably was what they wanted, or probably they were wanting, but they were probably seeking it to numb something. Mm-hmm. Every time after that was not a choice, because now they're addicted. Mm-hmm. Same thing with people who are sex workers. They are using a means to an end. We can't dictate what that end is. Mm-hmm. If you are their supplier for their drugs and they have to have sex with someone to get that said drug, they're going to do it because they see a means to an end. If I stay with this person, even though he sexually assaults me, but I don't have to sleep outside, I know for sure I'm not going to a shelter. And when you don't have the tools to do the things that you need to on your own, it's even easier to stay in those situations and to stay in those relationships because you don't have it.
Right.
You don't have it. So hierarchy needs looks different for everybody, and understanding whatever's at the forefront of their mind is important no matter what it is. And it's not for us to tell them what it is.
Right.
And what they should be putting their importance on. That is not for us.
Right. Coping. It's a big word that I learned. Coping.
Coping.
C-O-P-I-N-G. Coping.
And
it
that
changed
looks
my
different.
life.
And that looks different for
my life.
everybody.
It does. It absolutely does. I'm not here to judge anybody. I'm here to make sure that people are safe. So.
And too, with coping, understanding that we have to make sure that we are being inclusive in even how we approach how we connect with them as advocates. I'll never forget Teresa Stafford said she had a client who told her, Teresa, I'm glad that you're my advocate. I'm glad that you're on my case. But when you call me, I can't get out of the bed for weeks. So having those conversations, having a set way that you give your clients their information.
Right.
I have a client who does not get their updates from the advocate. The updates come from their mom. And she's a full-fledged adult.
Yeah.
And that's,
I like that idea. She was like, that sounds good to me.
Yeah. And she was like, I can't take it.
Yeah.
And to the point I was like, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think that, like, okay, bye. Like you give them the update and you hang up the phone and you go about your day.
Right.
We probably are stuck there because
right.
they'll probably be thinking of all the things that have happened. So when you are an advocate, ask your client, how do you want to get your updates? How do you want to be contacted? Are you a texter? Are you a phone caller?
A tweeter?
A tweeter, an emailer? There was a person on the team who only wanted their client only wanted updates by mail.
Yeah. Giving them back the choice.
Give them back the choice. You want somebody to be the buffer for you? Fine.
Love
There's
that.
nothing that says that you can't.
Idea. Yeah. Yeah, that's really creative.
Because again, they don't have a lot of say so. At least tell them they let them pick where they can meet and how they get their updates.
Red pen, blue pen, bring both.
Bring both. Bring some if you are an advocate or a person, a community partner working with a child, bring some crayons. Have YouTube playing on your phone.
Right.
Talk to the kids in your life. I had to keep updated with my cousin KJ and his sisters what's popular, because they're 7 and 13. And even my goddaughter, I'm like, Taylor, tell me what's new, what's popping on the scene. For her, it's JoJo Siwa. Had no clue who JoJo Siwa was. But as soon as she said it, I Googled.
Yep.
So when those kids come in, let me pull off some JoJo Siwa printing paper.
Right.
Oh, you are a child? Coco Melon's a thing. I had to tweet and ask Twitter, tell me what Coco Melon is. Apparently they're nursery rhymes. I'm asking a 7-year-old, what's new? TikTok, he's huge on that. Roblox and Among Us. Those are important to children. You bring that up and you get to talking, I'm sure that child is going to tell you whatever you need to know.
You are brilliant.
Thank you.
You're so brilliant. So going forward, Bree, what are some lessons that you have learned in this field that have strengthened your approach and work in Ohio when it comes to providing equity for survivors?
Great question. Have a clear lens in every case that you approach. I learned this when I first got into this work at 2 Days in May. I learned that you could have two people who have been in a non-lethal or non-tragic car accident, a basic fender bender, right? So Olivia got into a fender bender. I also got into that same said fender bender. One person can say, Olivia can say, yikes, man, this has ruined my day. But Olivia can still have the ability to do the next steps that are important for the accident. Call her insurance company, get her rental car, if she's sore, go to urgent care really quickly and go about her day. And if it's not a really bad car accident, get the person's information, call her insurance company when she gets home, run to Trader Joe's, do what she needs to do and go about her day. Whereas for me, I could be in that same type of fender bender and be home in bed for days. Because trauma happens to people and their approach and their response to trauma is completely different. So yes, if you want to tie it back to sexual assault, we both have experienced trauma. So you can have two survivors of sexual assault, two kind of the same kind of cases, but their approach to it can be completely different. You can have survivor A who goes directly to the hospital, goes to the same nurse, can account for everything, didn't take her shower, quote unquote, perfect survivor. That person did everything, quote unquote, by the book, right? Which is what society wants us to do, because society says to us, you can solve a crime like Law and Order in 30 minutes, and that's not feasible. And that every survivor goes right to the hospital, and every survivor can account to everything they've done and who they've had sex with, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And you can have survivor B, same type of assault, doesn't disclose for months. Because their trauma said that they could not have those conversations. And they may have went to the hospital after the fact. No, there's not going to be any viable DNA on their body. That doesn't disgrace or discredit what they went through. Doesn't make them less of a survivor. It doesn't make them less of a person. It's that their trauma told them, I can't process that right now.
Right.
I'm going to flood you with all these other memories. And then one day we'll come to it and we'll be able to talk about that. Both of these traumas, experiences, do not negate what they went through. It should never negate how we approach those survivors. Survivor A, who went right to the hospital, and survivor B deserve the same approach and the same connectivity to the justice system, the same investigation. If you're going to go hard for one, you have to go hard for the other.
Right.
It's not going to be this, no case is going to be the same, but if you stay survivor centered and perpetrator forward, you'll be successful every time. We're going to get the perpetrator, do everything we need to do to make sure that we can remove them from the community and keep them safe. But also we're going to be centered to the survivor to make sure that their voices are elevated, make sure that their services are being met, make sure that they have all the tools that they need so that they can matriculate through the system, so that the end goal will be even more successful, because there will be a part of the end goal of making sure that that perpetrator has been held accountable for their actions. So yes, just make sure that you are always looking at the lynches as clearly as possible and approaching every case with an equitable lens to make sure that you're doing for your survivors. And that's all.
Thank you so much, Bree. Oh my gosh, everything. I'm like, snap, 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 snap. Thank you so much for everything that you do and for joining us today and sharing with our listeners how you're continuing to do this very important work. I already can foresee that we're going to get feedback that we need a part 2. So look forward, please clear your schedule at some point in 2021 to come back and have these conversations with me, because you're a powerhouse.
Thank you.
You are, and I am just grateful to know you and to work with you.
I love it. Thank you for this opportunity. It means a lot to me. So yes, I can talk about sexual violence all day, every day. And yes, I look forward to the feedback because I'm excited. And just, be inclusive, guys.
Be inclusive, y'all.
Yes.
You've been listening to the Teal Talk podcast from the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. This episode was written and recorded by Olivia Montgomery. To learn more about the Alliance, visit OAESV.org.